The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Here's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove Football Show. We're previewing the Big Ten Football Conference, and we're talking with Nebraska wide receiver Dane Key. That's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove Football Show. Welcome into an all-new edition of the Sports Stove Football Show, presented by Righteous Felon Jerky. Join the flavor revolution at righteousfelon.com and use the promo code STOVE15. You're going to get 15% off your purchase each and every time. We've got a great program coming up for you. We have already done our ACC preview and our Big 12 preview. Tonight, our focus turns to the Big 10. And before we get into our preview, we have another awesome interview for you. If you've missed our past episodes, make sure you go back and check them out. Last week, we had Rashawn Sanford, the second running back out of Houston, with us. 2 weeks ago, Maddox Marcellus, linebacker out of Virginia. And tonight, we're bringing on the show Dane Key, the Nebraska wide receiver. Dane, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm just glad for you to have me here.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to chat with you. I told you right before we came on, I spent the last 11 years in Lexington, so knew all about you from your time there. Of course, high school at Frederick Douglass High School there in Lexington, played 3 seasons at UK, and now have transferred over to Nebraska. And I always like to ask with transfers, kind of when you were looking for a new place to go, why Nebraska? What was it that sold you on Nebraska?
What sold me mainly was my receiver coach last season at UK. He ultimately left Kentucky after the season, and he regrouped back with his college football coach, Dana Holgerson. And, just that duo right there, Coach Shores, Dana, and also having Dylan at Nebraska was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at your stats and all 3 seasons, amazing stats. You had 37 catches as a freshman, 42 as a sophomore, 47 as a junior, 519 yards, 636 yards, 715 yards. Like, it just kept getting better every season. And but Kentucky is not known. We're not trashing Kentucky, but Kentucky's not known as a high-flying offense. Right. And now Nebraska, with the staff that they currently have, with the quarterback they currently have, it seems kind of like a wide receiver's dream, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a wide receiver's dream, just playing with Coach Hogue. And, you have the position coach, you have the offensive coordinator, and you have the quarterback. So, what else are you missing?
Was it hard for you? You were home in Lexington. All your family, or a lot of your family there. Your dad played for UK, I believe, correct? And so you're sitting there. That is home. How hard of a decision was that to say, hey, for my last year, I'm gonna go play somewhere else?
Yeah, it was a really hard decision to leave the place that I love. Like you said, it's home. So it wasn't an easy decision, but it was a decision that needed to be made for my future. And ultimately, that's what I decided to do.
I like it, man. Now, tell me a little bit about the team this year. You guys are coming in. It's year 3 of the coach. You've got higher expectations this year, mainly because your quarterback, Dylan, is, he was a true freshman last year. Now he's a sophomore, a year under his belt. Like you said, the staff's amazing. All this kind of stuff. The transfer class is great for Nebraska as well. So tell me what we're going to be looking for with Nebraska this year. What should we expect from Nebraska, and specifically on your side of the ball now on the offense?
Yeah, I feel like people look at Nebraska as a run-heavy offense. I think that's what has been established here a long time ago. Just a team that's gonna punish you, play in and play out with running the football. But I think this year, it'll be a lot of oohs and ahs in the stands this year because of how good we are going to be, not only running the football but throwing the football. I think we'll have a really good throwing offense. Dylan, his second year under his belt, or his first year is under his belt now. Now he's going into his second year. That kid, he's special. He's one of one, and I'm super excited to play with him. And I just think this team is going to play with the chip on their shoulder because, we see everything. Nobody nobody's really counting Nebraska in. So we're going to make sure everybody knows that Nebraska is going to be that team.
Yeah, I like what you brought up about the style of play too, because I'm old enough to remember Nebraska being really good, and it was like you said, it was led by the run game, and that's just what you knew. Dad, we'll talk to him in a second. He knows more than I do even about that, and we are in a new era of football, and it seems like there's still teams that are having success. I mean, we saw the NFL this year. Running the football is still super important. But when you got a talent like you guys have in Dylan as your quarterback, and then you guys as the wide receiver crew as well, like this is the kind of football we're in now, where you got to be able to air it out at times, for sure. And tell me about the crew, the wide receiver room. Obviously you come in, you're established, you've got great stats coming into this year, even though it's your first year at Nebraska. What's the rest of the wide receiver room like?
Man, that room, I'm so grateful to be a part of that room. It's a room that I haven't been a part of. It's a room that really holds everybody accountable. If we see one person slacking, whether that's a guy who's never played before and has only done scout team, there's so much respect in that room that he will say something to a guy like me that's played 3 years in the SEC, and it won't be any hard feelings. That's just the type of room that we have. It's a brotherhood in there, and I just love those guys in there, and it's just a special bond that we have, and we're going to keep growing as a room off the field because that's only going to help us on the field.
Now, in 3 years in the SEC, you get to play at some really cool stadiums against some really big programs. You transition to the Big Ten, and now you've got a whole new set of programs to play and stadiums to go to. I've said this with all the guests we've had on. I understand the next game's the most important game, but is there a game on your schedule that you've kind of got circled as just a cool experience? Like, hey, I get to go play in this stadium, and you're kind of looking forward to the opportunity that comes with that specific game. Is there a game like that on the schedule?
I'm really just super excited for a home game. They said it's something. They said it's nothing like I've experienced before, and I mean I played in some really big stadiums, so I know Husker Nation is going to show out for every home game because I mean it's been sold out since, I don't want to say the wrong date, but I know it's been sold out for years before I've been born. So yeah. I'm just super excited and ready for a home game and ready to see that crowd.
It probably is at this point in time one of the more underrated home experiences or football experiences because it's been so long since consistent national championship contenders. But the atmosphere there, you see it even like with the volleyball, it's incredible. Like they come out and support you guys. I think that's pretty cool too. I'm going to bring my dad up on the screen now. And Dad, I'm sure you've got some questions. You've been listening here to the conversation with Dean. Dane, what do you got for him?
Yeah, Dane, thanks a lot for coming on. And I know, things are, I'm sure, different in different programs and with different coaches. But I wonder, the way Nebraska runs practice, is there a major difference in that from what practices were in Kentucky, whether it's pace or intensity, or is practice pretty much run the same in college football?
Yeah, I would definitely say there was definitely an increase in practice when I stepped foot in Nebraska. I think it was a little bit more intense, and also, just longer practices as well, because Coach Rhule, he wants everything run the right way, his way, and I think everybody knows the standard and the expectation that he wants when you step in between those white lines. Whether we're on the same team or not, it's going to be a physical day because that's what's going to prepare you for Saturdays.
Gotcha. I was wondering too with Coach Rhule, does he, I'm sure he does some, but is there a lot of talk about his NFL experience? Does he use that as illustrations a lot and motivation? Or, of course, everybody knows his background?
Yes, Coach Rhule talks about the NFL every time he speaks in front of the team because mostly everybody's in that team room. Their goal is to play in the NFL. So he kind of uses it as motivation, and just not only as motivation, but he also uses it for just the expectations that are held at the next level. So he wants to start implementing it now that we're in college. So when we do take that next step at the next level, it's second nature.
Right. Again, like Vince said, I go back a ways, and I remember a lot with, Nebraska. And when I think of that, really, when I think of when I was a kid, college football, you thought a lot about Nebraska and Oklahoma, Tom Osborne, Barry Switzer, all those type of things. And when you talked about the stadium, I always remember one thing they always pointed out on television was that the stadium in Nebraska is the third largest city in the state of Nebraska on Saturday. So it's quite a thing with from that end for sure. Again, I grew up in Illinois, and then I was in Tennessee for, I guess, 30, a little over 35 years. And then now I live in Ohio, but I'm real familiar with the Big Ten and rivalries. I wonder, since Nebraska has come into the Big Ten, is there a certain Big Ten team that's kind of Nebraska's rival these days?
Yes, I think the main rival is Iowa. Everybody around the building, they don't like those guys. So, I've slowly started to not like those guys as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I did a little research on that because, the Big Ten has a lot of games that give away, an old looking bucket or an axe or things like that. And Iowa was one of the things they pointed out. So I thought maybe that might be what the situation would be. Again, I know you grew up in Lexington. And grew up there, and that's home. But how would Lincoln compare? What do you think of Lincoln so far that you've been there?
I really enjoy Lincoln. It's definitely a place where it helps me stay locked in, just stay focused on football, because that's mainly what's here is football. Everybody around here loves football. You're treated like everybody who sees you in public, if they recognize you and know that you play football, I mean, you're the best person in town to them. So it's been awesome just being able to live here in Lincoln because of how great everybody around this state is, how nice everybody is to you and how well they welcome you.
Gotcha.
Dane, I want to say real quick, Dad, sorry. That was the cleanest answer I've ever heard. But there's nothing else to do in the area except for football. And I love it, man. I mean, it's a college town. There's fun with it. But you answered that perfectly, man. That's great.
Well, that was good. And Vince and I are big Packer fans, and that's what players always say about Green Bay. It's just football. Yeah. And, that's what everything is there. So someday when you're there catching passes from Jordan Love, you'll enjoy it there too. So anyhow, good. Well, hey, thanks for being on. That's great. It sounds like you really adapted well there and fit well. And this be an interesting year. Should be a good year for Nebraska.
Yes, it will be.
Dane, I want to know, Coach Stoops, obviously great football coach. He's more of a defensive mind. Coach Rhule's obviously more of an offensive mind. Is there a difference in culture is probably the wrong word when it comes to this kind of what I'm talking about, but is there a difference? Can you tell a difference in the defensive minded head coach versus an offensive minded head coach?
It's kind of hard to answer that question because, I mean, I feel like if you know football, you know football. And so both coaches have really, really helped me understand the game of football. Whereas Coach Rhule, I can go talk to him about a certain play on offense, whereas Coach Stoops, I can go talk to him about a certain play, how it can work against a certain defense. So, I mean, there's definitely pros and cons because, I mean, Coach Rhule does the same thing. If I need help looking at a defense, how this play works on this defense, he can answer that as well. So, I mean, it's really hard to answer that question just because they're both great coaches who know football.
Yeah, that's cool. And that's pretty neat that you've gotten to play for – you're getting ready to play for Coach Rhule and Dana Holgorsen. I mean, that's pretty cool. And Stoops as well. What he did at Kentucky, what he's done at Kentucky is really incredible. Because I'm sure you're growing up, you remember some seasons that the Kentucky Wildcats were not too super great.
Definitely changed that program around.
Yeah. I'm not going to put you on the spot. I would love to know your thoughts on Vince Morrow, but we're gonna pass on that for now because we're excited for your season coming up at Nebraska. Maybe someday we can have a conversation about that on another time. But
yeah, maybe someday we can.
Well, Dane, we're excited for you, man. A new opportunity for you here at Nebraska. You know, you guys are in that spot where the expectation is kind of low from the outside. I know on the inside it's not that way. And I'm excited to see how you go out and prove the doubters wrong and how you finish your college.
All right. Looks like an internet issue there. Hopefully Vince will be right back with us here pretty quick. So, and that's a good deal. What's your major in school, Dane?
My major is human development family studies.
Okay. There we go, Vince. You back?
About that. I'm not sure what happened. My screen just went blank. But hey, Dane, thanks, man. We really do appreciate you coming on and good luck, man, moving forward.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and go Big Red.
That's right. There you go. Dane Key, the Nebraska wide receiver. Appreciate that conversation. And like I said, Dad, you know, Kentucky, Vince Morrow just left for Louisville to be their GM, and the big dog in Kentucky football. That's a big deal. But I didn't want to weigh down Dane's interview with Kentucky Talk. So like I said, maybe some other day we can talk about that news because I'm sure I haven't talked to anybody back in Kentucky about it yet, but that's a massive slap in the face to Kentucky, in my opinion, from Vince Morrow. But that was fun. I appreciate Dane coming on and chatting. Appreciate Nebraska allowing us to talk to him as well. And so that's pretty cool. My days covering EKU had a say young man, I suppose, that worked at EKU, worked with Coach Wells, and had to go through him a lot with my interviews. Now he's the assistant AD out there at Nebraska in a position like that. So I appreciate him helping as well. So fun times. All right, Dad, let's get into the Big Ten. I want to remind everybody as we're here tonight going through this, the show is presented by Righteous Felon Jerky. So if you like jerky, you're not going to find a better tasting and a better textured jerky than what you can find at righteousfelon.com. Go to righteousfelon.com. Use the promo code STOVE15. You're going to get 15% off your purchase. And Dad, thanks for holding the weight there. As like I said, my screen just shut down for some reason. And I was like, well, I hope I can get back on. And if not, hopefully Dad's carrying on for another hour. So let's get going, though, with the Big Ten. We got a lot to discuss here. We do our each conference. We've done tiers for teams. We have 4 tiers we're putting teams into. We have a championship tier. We have the conference.
All right. Vince should be back here in just a minute. Again, we've had a couple of technical issues tonight, but I think we'll have that resolved here pretty quick and be ready to go again.
All right.
All right. You're back again.
Yep. Who knows? I think maybe the internet's bugging out on me. So let's try to go through these tiers. And we got, I don't know what's the last thing you heard me say, Dad? What's the last thing you heard me say?
You just talking about, the last I heard was you were just talking about going through the tiers.
All right. That's what we're doing. 4 tiers: championship tier, conference championship tier, bowl tier, and then the no bowl tier. So, Dad, how many teams do you have in the Big Ten that you think are actual national championship contenders?
I just have 2. There maybe could be more than that, but I just have 2.
All right. Who are they?
They're Ohio State and Oregon.
All right. So interesting. So I have Ohio State and Oregon, of course, as well. But I also have Penn State in that list with the amount of veterans they have returning. It's, yeah, we'll talk about it. I'm surprised you leave them out of this conversation, though. All right. Conference championship tier, Dad. I've got 4 teams. I've got Illinois, USC, Michigan, and Indiana. And we're going to talk about these because Michigan and Indiana were on the verge for me of being not in this tier, being down in the bowl tier, but I decided to go with them. So Illinois, USC, Michigan, and IU. Who do you have in the conference championship tier?
Conference championship tier, I have 2. I have Penn State and Illinois.
Interesting. All right. So the bowl tier is going to be massive, I assume, for you. Who do you have in the bowl tier?
Bowl teams, I have Michigan, Indiana, USC, Washington, Minnesota, Nebraska, and Iowa.
All right. And you don't have Rutgers in that group?
I'm sorry?
You don't have Rutgers in that group?
No, I don't. I have
That's
them.
the only team I have that you do not have in that list there is Rutgers. I got Rutgers included in there with Iowa, Washington, Nebraska, Minnesota, and the other teams I had up in the conference championship tier. So that means for the not making a bowl, I've got 6 teams and you've got a bunch. Well, I guess you got 7 probably because you got Rutgers in that group too. Michigan State, Wisconsin, Northwestern, UCLA, Purdue, and Maryland. And I think Dad Rutgers is the only other team you'd have in that group, right?
Right. Yeah. Otherwise, I've got the same ones: Wisconsin, Michigan State, Maryland, UCLA, Purdue, and Northwestern.
Okay. All right. Let's go through each team, and hopefully the internet will survive. Let's start with Ohio State. Last season, 10-2, 7-2 in the conference. Now, even though they didn't win the conference, they were the national champions of the college football world. But they lost to Michigan again last year. They lose all kinds of people, of course, but what they return is wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, who may be the best receiver to ever play the game. He is definitely one of the top wide receivers currently in college football. Looks like Julian Sayin will be the quarterback for Ohio State. They bring in a offensive tackle from Rice in Ethan Okinawa, who should be incredibly helpful to them on the offensive line. And they bring in a Purdue tight end, Max Karen, 51 catches, 685 yards, and 4 touchdowns last season. Dad, their win total is at 10.5, and I will tell you, I'm at under on this. I've got them at 10 wins. And we'll talk about some games here in a moment. But how do you feel about Ohio State coming into this season?
Well, I think they're going to be very, very good. Again, I think they're Ohio State right now. Their program is one of those as far as recruiting and transfers. They can get who they want. They can get what they need. And I think they'll be very strong. I think I have them down for 11 wins, which would be over 10.5. I don't see much of a drop off, with Ohio State. And, I think that, I think the loss to Michigan last year obviously be quite the motivation. And, I think now that they lost a big assistant coach, and we'll see how much difference that makes. But I think they've replaced that pretty well. So we'll see.
Well, I mean, they lost 2 coordinators, offensive and defensive coordinator. They didn't get rid of the defensive coordinator, but I don't think that was as big a loss as because they got him replaced. Offensive coordinator is the big question mark, of course, with Chip Kelly being gone. Dad, when I look at them, I see 4 losable games for Ohio State. And so I'm predicting they split these games. They got Texas off the bat. They've got Penn State, both of those games at home. And then on the road, they've got Michigan, and they've got this Illinois team that we're going to discuss in a little bit. That's dangerous as well. Both of those on the road. If Michigan was at home, I'd feel better about it. But being that Michigan's on the road for them this year, they were already struggling to beat them. I'm intrigued by this one, Dad. And if they got Michigan early in the year, then I would pick them over Michigan very quickly. But later in the year, that gives time for their freshman quarterback. We'll talk about him in a moment to figure things out. So that's why I've got them at 10-2, which I still think is a really good season. They won the national championship at 10-2. So I think there's still a lot of potential for Ohio State here. But those 4 games are kind of the ones that get me. What do you think about those 4 games, or do you have a different game that stands out to you?
No, I think that's true. Again, we'll talk about Illinois in a minute. I think they'll be good, but I don't know, how they'll do with Ohio State. The Texas game will be big. Penn State just hasn't been able to turn the corner, and I'm just not sure they're going to be able to this year. Maybe at some point they will. The Michigan game is interesting, your take on that. Again, I live in Ohio now, and Ohio State can't lose to Michigan again. I mean, it's just life won't go on the same if that happens, and everybody knows that. So
Yeah.
I don't really care where they play that one this year. That there'll be an emphasis on that game like there's never been.
Yeah, I mean, the stakes are high. There's no doubt about that. Because if they don't win the national championship, they may be looking for a new football coach this year. And it might have been Chip Kelly. You never know. But at the end of the day, they did win the national championship. So, yeah, we'll see. Let's jump to Oregon next. Oregon 13-1 last year. 9-0 in the conference. Welcome to the Big Ten, right? Dante Moore is in at quarterback now for Oregon. Huge transfer pickups for them this year. Isaiah World, he's the left tackle out of Nevada. He's a first-round draft pick next season. He comes in and immediately helps Oregon. They also get a USC guard, Emmanuel Pregnon. Running back Mekhi Hughes from Tulane comes over after a 1,400-yard season and 15 touchdowns. They pick up a big safety as well from Purdue. They've got a safety on their team, Dad, that if he wasn't a safety, he'd be the number 1 overall draft pick this coming year in Caleb Downs. But until then, he's going to be a top 5 maybe pick in the draft this year too. I'm sorry, that's Ohio State. I don't know why I got ahead of myself on that one. But nonetheless, here we sit with what Oregon is doing. 10.5 is their win total after a 13-win season last year. I'm going over 10.5 for Oregon. I think they're at least 11 this year, Dad. And I'll explain why here in a second with some of these games. But how do you feel about Oregon?
Yeah, I believe they'll go over also. I have them at 11 wins. So, Oregon's just one of those programs that really has things going and they're strong. People want to play out there, on the West Coast. And, but like I said, they adjusted very, very well to the Big Ten. There was no problem with that. And so I think Oregon will be a very good, very, very good football team again. And again, they don't have what Ohio State on the regular schedule.
Right.
So that helps both teams there.
Yeah.
So, I think Oregon will be very tough again.
Yeah, I mean, quarterback's the question mark for sure. Can he pick up where they left off? But they go on the road to Penn State and Iowa, and then they got a home game against Indiana. We're going to talk about all 3 of these teams here in just a moment. Those are the games that kind of determine whether or not they finish at 11 wins or 12 wins even versus at 10 wins or 9 wins. And these are just kind of Iowa and Penn State on the road are just kind of those games that you're going to have to overcome some things in those games. And Oregon's good, well coached. I think they can overcome that. Hence the reason I'm giving them 11 wins. I give myself a buffer with giving them 1 loss. So that's where I sit with that. Any other games for Oregon you're concerned about or interested in?
No, the Penn State one is the main one, I think, on their schedule.
All right, let's go to Penn State then. Penn State 11-2 last year, 8-1 in the conference. I have notoriously not been high on Penn State. I have never been big on them. I don't really love their current coach. I hate their history. But Dad, they're just returning everybody. Drew Aller's back at quarterback, so you expect him to take a step forward. They got a 2-headed monster at running back. Either one of these guys could have come out this past year in the draft. They both chose to stay, in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. While they lose a incredible defensive star to the draft, they return Danny Dennis Sutton, who had 8.5 sacks last year. And then they add an edge in the transfer portal, Amari Campbell from UNC. Offensively, they're bringing in a receiver from Troy who had 76 catches, over 1,000 yards, and 11 touchdowns last year as well. I look at this team, Dad, 10.5, same win total as Ohio State and Oregon. And I'm going to go over on this one, Dad. And the big one is they've got Oregon at home. They got Ohio State on the road. They've got Iowa on the road. They've got Indiana at home. And they're going to have to win 3 of those games. Can they do it? Listen, I'm the first one to say in the past I would have said no. But you return this much firepower, this much experience, this many offensive guys who have already played together and done it well together. I just have to believe that this is the year Penn State goes over the top in the Big Ten. I think they're the Big Ten champs, and I think they're dangerous come playoff time as well. So that's why I'm going over 10.5. You don't seem to be as high on them as me. So give me your thoughts on Penn State.
Yeah, they are returning a lot. They've been good now for several years, but they've not been able to get over the hump. Correct. And I don't, when you look at Oregon, when you look at Ohio State, I just don't see where Penn State's going to, be able to do that now. And they'll have to stay focused because they can't lose to some team that they shouldn't lose to. And they've had a couple teams play them very, very close the last couple of years. And again, I'll try to be as careful as you were, but I think the reason for that is the coaching. I'm not big on James Franklin, haven't been big on him in the past for a lot of reasons. And I just don't think, he provides the leadership, to be able to handle sometimes tough situations like that. Now, again, they may break through and they only have to win a couple of games. And if they get in the playoff, anything could happen there from that end. But, they'll have to have some real outstanding play, I think, to be able to do that. And, just not as big on Penn State. So, as far as a lot of good reasons, maybe I don't have those, but that's
Sure.
kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think, again, I go back to the quarterback situation. Oregon and Ohio State, the quarterbacks are going to be good, but they don't have the experience that Drew Aller has. Last year, there were rumors that had Aller entered the draft, he would have been the second quarterback off the board, and he would have been a top 5 pick. Now, I don't see that. I was trying to figure out how in the world that was the case, but there's obviously some smoke there. And so if Drew Aller takes a step forward this year, Penn State's going to be hard to beat. If he stays the same or regresses, that changes things, obviously, there as well. They also did lose defensive coordinator Tom Allen. We talked about that in the ACC preview. We'll see how all that picks up, though. All right, let's go to Michigan. They're a really intriguing team this year. 8-5 last season, 5-4 in the conference. Of course, they beat Ohio State again. They've got their coaches suspended for the first 2 games to start the year, and that's pretty big considering they're going to Oklahoma in that first 2 games. They do host Ohio State this year. That's pretty important. Freshman quarterback Bryce Underwood seems to be the quarterback for Michigan this year. True freshman, incredibly talented. A lot of thoughts about Bryce Underwood being the guy of the future, the quarterback to be looking for down the road as well. They also brought in Fresno State quarterback Mikey Keene, who had 28, almost 2,900 yards last year, 18 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. The defense is mostly guys from in the building. Not a lot of transfers on this team. Now, they obviously lost guys to the draft, so they're bringing in the last year's backups ideally. But nonetheless, they've got some talent there in-house they're working with as well. They added a running back from Alabama, Justice Haynes. He had 72 carries, 448 yards, and 7 touchdowns last year. And they bring in an Arkansas safety, TJ Metcalf, who had 3 interceptions last season as well. Bryce Underwood is the story, though, at quarterback. If he comes in and is elite as a freshman, boy, are they going to be dangerous. If he doesn't, they could lose some that they shouldn't lose or some toss-up games. So my big games to look for this year for Michigan, of course, at Oklahoma, at USC, that trip out to California, and then the home game against Ohio State at the end. 8.5 is the win total, Dad. I've got him at 9, so I've got him over 8.5. How do you sit with Michigan?
Yeah, I have them at 9 also, so it'd be over 8.5. I think Michigan's going to be a good team. I don't know that they're going to be elite. Again, you do have the coach suspended. There's still a little bit of fallout from the old coach and, right, getting everything, squared away there. And I think Michigan's going to have that for a few years, to be right honest. But if this freshman quarterback is the real thing, but freshman quarterbacks, and again, the Big Ten is a tough tough conference.
Yeah.
So he's not going to have an easy time there. I think the key to them is going to be to win games that, people would look at it now and say, oh, they're going to win those. How are they going to, what about Nebraska? What about Wisconsin, who may not be real good? But again, a lot of history there with, everybody, all the old teams in the Big Ten get up when they play Michigan.
Sure.
No doubt about that, whether it's in the big house or whether they have them at their place. So Michigan has to be poised and ready to go every game. And, can you do that with a freshman quarterback? And you talked about the defense. I mean, man, they had guys in the draft. Every time you looked on defense, it was a guy from Michigan, whether it was in the middle of the defense or the front line or the back. So that's got to have some effect, no doubt about it. So,
yeah, I agree. All right, let's talk about your Illini. Illinois, 10-3 last season, massive season, 6-3 in the conference. They've got a pretty fair schedule this year. Of course, 10 wins last year is huge. Can they repeat that? Is a big question mark. Quarterback Luke Altmaier does return. That's important. That's huge, actually, for Illinois. And they have the best defensive secondary in all of college football. So if the front end can get to the quarterback and can stuff the run, everything else will be fine behind them. They bring in a transfer out of West Virginia at wide receiver, Hudson Clement, 51 catches, 741 yards, and 5 touchdowns last year. They also bring in some Wisconsin transfers on the defensive side of the ball. Dad, after a 10-win season, their win total set at 7.5 this year. I'm going to go over. I think it's at least 8 for this team, but I think that they can surprise some people, do some damage, and find themselves fighting for the conference championship as well. So give me your thoughts on your Fighting Illini.
Yeah, obviously, I think returning the quarterback is a big thing, and because he seems to really be a leader. He's a good quarterback, but he seems to be able to lead the team. Bielema has done a good job. He's unique in a lot of ways there, but he has a system, and I think the players have bought into that. I think he's getting people to want to come to Illinois to play football, which that has not been the case all the time from there. The thing about Illinois, and we'll talk about Indiana in a little bit, will be the same thing. Illinois is not going to sneak up on people anymore. Right. I mean, I think when they're playing Illinois, they'll be ready. But Bielema will have everybody ready to play. It was interesting you pointed out about the defensive backs, the secondary, because a lot of what we've talked about so far in the conference has been quarterbacks. This team has a good quarterback. If this quarterback plays well, you don't want to have a secondary where you just let people, come out and can throw all over the place on you. So if they can stay in it, seems like Illinois always has good running backs. I'm not exactly sure what they have this year, but if they, and Bielema, has a history of being able to run the ball. So if they can do that, they'll definitely stay in games from there. So I think Illinois can have a good year. Whether they can make the playoffs or not, I don't know. I think there'd be a chance of that. And again, one more successful season, and it's really going to help them, with recruiting and the transfer and the portal and everything like that. Again, Illinois is a state that has a lot of football players. So if they can get to where they can keep the kids in there from Chicago and the St. Louis area, they're going to be in good shape.
Well, that's it. You got Chicago, you got St. Louis, you got Indianapolis not far away as well. So, they got a lot to pull from there. They're returning running back Aiden Lowry, spelled like Laffery. He is a Gibson City, Illinois boy. 97 touches last year, 589 yards, and 4 touchdowns last season. And then their secondary guy is junior Caden Fegan. Last year had 67 carries, 306 yards, and 3 touchdowns to go along with it as well. Dad, we need to keep this thing moving. We're going longer than I anticipated already. By the way, Illinois plays at Indiana this year, so that's an important one. And then they host USC and Ohio State this year. So important games there. All right, Indiana 11-2 last year, surprised everyone. 8-1 in the conference, playoff team. New quarterback in town, Fernando Mendoza. Know the name. Last year at Cal, he had 3,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. But if you go back and you look at this coach's history with his quarterbacks, you can anticipate Fernando Mendoza to be at the top of the list when it comes to yards. And if he can protect the football, he might even be in the Heisman conversation later on this season. This Indiana team shocked the world last year, Dad. They have their win total, though, is at 8.5 this year. So they go from 11 wins to an 8.5 projection this year. Dad, I know I put them in the conference championship tier, but I'm going to go under 8.5. I've got them at 8 wins this season, although I think they can still get to 10 wins. I've got them at 8. How about you for Indiana?
Yeah, I have them under also at 8 wins. That's about what I have there. And again, they're not going to surprise anybody this year. I think they have a good coach. We'll find out how that's going to be, because it was quite a shock the way Indiana played last year. But games will be Illinois and Iowa, I think.
Yeah, and I threw in there. So on the road, they've got at Iowa, at Oregon, at Penn State. They do host Illinois, though. They got some tough road games this year, and that's why I put them at 8. Excuse me, 8 wins. All right, let's go to Nebraska next. 7-6 was their record last year. 3-6 in the conference. Year 3 of Coach Rhule brings a lot more expectation. Dylan Raiola at quarterback last season as a freshman, 2,800 yards, 13 touchdowns, 11 picks. We talked to Dane Key earlier. Last year at Kentucky, 47 catches, 715 yards, and 2 touchdowns. They also bring in a wide receiver from Cal, Nasiah Hunter, 40 catches, 578 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Dad, it was so fun talking to Dane to get some insight kind of on the insides of Nebraska, how they're feeling about things. I loved what he said about Iowa. That was great as well. Dad, I look at this team, and I've got them at either 7 wins or 8 wins. I'm going to go over with 8. I think Matt Rhule, I think Dana Hogerson, I think they get things right this year, having the quarterback in place, another year older now, putting talent around them. I just got to believe Nebraska's going to find some magic again this year. So I'm going to go 8 wins over for Nebraska. How do you feel?
Yeah, it was great talking to Dane, and I think Rhule is a good coach. Again, the Big Ten's a tough conference, and they're right there, with 5 or 6 teams that are all about in the same spot. So I had them at 7 wins. They could easily get 8, but they're going to have big games. I had was Michigan and Minnesota. Minnesota's going to be the type of game they got to win. Iowa's the type of game they got to win. So we'll see there.
And I'm with you on that. The games that they should win, have to win, are on the road. At Minnesota, at Maryland, at Cincinnati. Those are the games that if you're good at, that's the teams you got to beat, but they're all on the road. That makes it a little harder as well for there. So that's what I'm looking for when it comes to Nebraska this year. All right, let's go to Iowa next. Iowa's 8-5 last year, 6-3 in the conference. Last year, they had 2 losses that they should not have lost, UCLA and Michigan State. But Iowa scored more points last year than they've scored since 2018. And they're bringing in a transfer quarterback, Mark Gronowski from San Diego State. And in his career at San Diego State, he had over 10,000 yards. The run game is going to be good. We know it is at Iowa. But they get to host Penn State, Indiana, and Oregon. And really on the road, their only big matchup on the road is USC. And so I look at that, Dad, and see some positive things for them. At the end of the day, though, I'm going to go under 7.5 because we talked about how tough the Big Ten is this year. I believe in the other teams more than I believe in Iowa. I've got them at 7 wins, not able to get to that 8-win mark.
Yeah, I have them at 6 wins, which would put them in a bowl, but it'd be under 7.5. And again, the Iowa State will be a big game and a tough game for them this year. And then, games like Wisconsin and teams right where they're at, they're going to have to win. But I think if they'll win 6, they may be doing well.
Yeah, at Iowa State, obviously going to be a tough one. At USC, at Rutgers. Those are all road games that are going to be really, really tough for them. Okay, let's go to USC next. Southern California in the Big Ten, still a little hard to get over. 7-6 last year, 4-5 in the conference. They've got sophomore quarterback Jaden Maeva, 6'4", 220. He's got the build for it, right? 1,200 yards last year, 11 touchdowns, 6 picks. USC should have a pretty solid defense this year. The question is, can the offense put it together with Lincoln Riley as your coach? You should be able to play some pretty solid offense. So we anticipate that as well. Dad, their win total is at 7.5. I'm going over 7.5 for USC.
Yeah, I'll go over 7.5 for them also. Of course, got some big games with Michigan and Notre Dame. Will be big games there. Like you said, it's hard to get used to USC and the Big Ten. It's harder to get used to USC not being at the top of the conference. So, Lincoln Riley's a good coach, so maybe they're headed that way.
Yeah, and I'll throw in there Iowa, and then they go to the road at Illinois this year as well. Some tough games there for USC. All right, Minnesota is next. 8-5 last year, 5-4 in the conference. PJ Fleck is in year 9 at Minnesota, Dad. He's had 8 or more wins in 3 of his last 4 seasons. The schedule's manageable this year. Drake Lindsey, who was their backup last year, 6'5", 230, is vying for the quarterback job. He'll be fighting against the transfer Dylan Whitkey as well. Run game has to be better this year. Defensive backs have to be better this year. I'm not sure they added enough in the transfer portal to make the additions that they needed to. 6.5 is the win total, Dad. I've got them at 6, so I'm going under 6.5 for Minnesota. How do you feel about the Gophers?
I've got them at 7, so I'll be over 6.5. But again, they're right. Again, they're in that glob there with 4 or 5 other teams that are about the same. So we'll see again, that teams like Iowa and Nebraska, they're, is the games that are going to make a difference for them.
All right. Yeah, I've actually got games like Rutgers, Wisconsin, and Michigan State. They're the ones that they're supposed to win. And so I got those as the key games for them. Let's go to Rutgers next. 7-6 last year, 4-5 in the conference. Quarterback Ethan Kaliakamanis, I believe is how you say that. 2,700 yards last year, 18 touchdown. The defense has to get better. You expect that it will with their coach. They bring in a lot of transfers. A North Texas receiver who had 66 catches, 822 yards, and 11 touchdowns last year. An FAU running back, CJ Campbell, 844 yards and 11 touchdowns last year. And they bring in a defensive end, Eric O'Neill from JMU. James Madison. Hey there, A.D. Roan. How you doing? 13 sacks. And he also had an interception last year as well. Dad, I've got Rutgers at 5.5. I'm going over 5.5. They need to win those games at Washington, the game against Maryland, the game at Minnesota. That's where I sit with Rutgers.
Yeah, I may be off on this, but I have them under. Again, somebody's going to, lose several of the games that are really close games. I have them under there. I had them at 4 wins. They may win more than that, but we'll see.
4 wins. All right. I think that's kind of a bold take there, Dad. I like it. All right, let's go Washington next. 6-7 in the conference, 4-5 in the conference, 6-7 overall last year. Year 2 at Jed Fish. He was 6-0 at home. That's pretty good, but not great on the road last year. Damon Williams is dynamic, dual threat quarterback. He had 430 total yards and 5 touchdowns in their bowl game last year. We haven't seen a lot of them, but we're expecting big things out of Damon Williams. They get Ohio State at home. They get Oregon at home. They get Michigan on the road this year. We'll see how that helps them out there with those tough games at home. Dad, they got a tough schedule. They're going to be on the road against Wisconsin and Maryland, teams that they need to beat. They're hosting Rutgers this year. 7.5 is the win total. I just don't see it. I'm going under 7.5 for Washington.
Yeah, I have them under 7.5, but I have them at 7 wins. So, we'll see how that goes there. They're going to have to obviously win, some of those in the middle games, but I think they could do that.
Yeah, and I think that quarterback, this year he's going to grow. I think next year he's going to be phenomenal. So we'll see how that one shakes out. Michigan State up next, 5-7 last year, 3-6 in the conference. Aiden Childs is legit at quarterback, 2,400 yards, 13 touchdowns, 11 picks last year. But this guy, he's a dual threat. He's talented. They got some key offensive transfers, including MTSU wide receiver Omari Kelly comes over. They completely overhauled their defense through the portal, and they've got a potential first-round pick and safety Malik Spencer as well. But a super tough schedule, Dad. Even with Omari Kelly, the MTSU product, 53 catches, 869 yards, and 4 touchdowns last year, I don't think it's enough. At 5.5 wins, I'm going under again for Michigan State.
Yeah, I have them under also. I have them at 5 wins. Again, I think they're one of those teams where it's, tough conference and, unless everybody splits with everybody, you're going to have teams like Michigan State that are going to be just out of the bowl picture.
Yeah, and with Aiden Childs at quarterback, it was hard for me to go under here. But like I said, they got a tough schedule. They got some games they can win for sure. At Nebraska, which should be a tough one. At Minnesota will be a tough one. Home against Maryland. Like, if you win those 3 games, you're probably getting bowl eligible. But I'm just not sure they can get there. All right, Wisconsin is next. They were 5-7 last year, 3-6 in the conference. Luke Fickell is 500 in his time at Wisconsin, and they have a brutal schedule. They have 7 games against preseason top 25 teams. 5 of those are top 13 teams. So it's nuts. They bring in the transfer Billy Edwards Jr. from Maryland at quarterback, 2,800, almost 2,900 yards, 15 touchdowns, 9 picks. Dad, I just look at this schedule and go, Luke Fickell's getting fired. 5.5 is the win total. I just don't think they make it there. I'm going under 5.5 for Wisconsin.
Same way. I think 5 wins, will be tough. And I like Luke Fickell, but yeah, they're in a real spot with their schedule and stuff. And I listened to some Wisconsin grads, alumni on the radio some, and everybody's trying to be positive, but I think everybody knows with the schedule, this is, Luke Fickell's going to have to really do a job to make this happen. So,
yeah. Agreed. All right, let's go to UCLA. 5-7 last year, 3-6 in the conference. They had a horrendous offense last year. They bring in the transfer from Tennessee, Nico, and I can't say his last name, so I won't try. They were 132nd in rushing last year at UCLA. That won't cut it. The back end should be okay on defense, but the front 7 is a massive question mark for them. You bring in Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee. I've got no respect for this kid. Whether that's right or wrong is a whole nother story. But last year, Tennessee, 2,600 yards, 19 touchdowns, 5 picks. He was playing for a quarterback's coach, and he goes to UCLA now, and I just think it's a different story. I don't think it turns out well for anybody, Dad. 5.5's their number. I'm going under. They got to play at UNLV, at Michigan State, and home against Maryland. Winnable games, yes, but will they win them? That's a whole nother question. So I'm going under 5.5 for UCLA.
Yeah, I have them at 5 wins also, so that would be just under there at UCLA.
All right. Any comments on Nico?
Again, I think he was a good quarterback. He had great potential there at Tennessee. We'll see, whether he made the right move or not. Is he going to have the players around him at UCLA he had at Tennessee? No. So, we will see how he can do.
Okay. Northwestern is next, 4-8 last year, 2-7 in the conference. They were 18th in offense last year in the Big Ten. If you're 18th in a conference that's called the Big Ten, you're probably not doing very good. Quarterback transfer, Preston Stone. That's a big pickup. SMU quarterback. 2 years ago had a great year. Last year lost his job. But that's a big pickup for Northwestern. The offensive coordinator comes over from South Dakota State. That's a pretty big pickup, too. He brings with him wide receiver Griffin Wilde, the San Diego State pass catcher, 70 catches and 12 touchdowns last year. The defense is just okay. So that's where you're sitting there going, well, what's going to happen? Let me go back to Preston Stone real quick. In 2023, he had almost 3,200 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. And then last year he loses his job. So he can redeem himself at Northwestern, Dad. Their win total is at 3.5. And I look at the quarterback and I go over. So it may only be 4, it may be 5, but I'm going over 3.5 for Northwestern.
Yeah, I mean, I had them at 3 wins, so I'll go under. We'll see. Like you said, when the comment you made that the defense was just okay, and we've been talking about all these Big Ten teams and these powered offenses, so that doesn't bode well together.
I understand that for sure. I've got UCLA, Minnesota, and Tulane as the games to watch for Northwestern. If they can win those games, they'll be sitting pretty. Purdue, let's go to Purdue next. 1-11 last year, 0-9 in the conference. Barry Odom comes in as the new head coach. Can he replicate what he did in UNLV is the question. There's a QB competition between returner Ryan Brown, who originally transferred to North Carolina and then ended up returning to stay here at Purdue. They also have Evans Chuba, who comes over from Washington State, and Malachi Singleton from Arkansas. So a 3-way battle at quarterback. I think Ryan Brown wins that job. They have 5 new starters on the offensive line. The run game should be fine. The pass game is the question mark for sure. Dad, I just look at this team. They were so bad last year. It's going to take time. I think Barry Odom can find success. Their win total is at 3.5, and I look at their schedule. I think they can get to 4 wins. So I'm going to go over for Purdue, which is kind of surprising to me personally. But I'm going to go over on Purdue 3.5.
Yeah, I've got them at 3, so I'll go under. But they're a team that can surprise somebody, and if they can surprise 1 or 2 teams, then they're going to be better, 4 or 5 wins. So, we'll see. The Boilermakers, like I said, have a long way to go and can only go up. So.
All right, the last team is Maryland, 4-8 last year, 1-8 in the conference. They have a easier schedule than they did last year. They bring in a UCLA transfer at quarterback, Justin Martin. He doesn't have much experience, though. The defense only had 3 sacks in the last 3 games, 14 total on the season. That's not going to cut it. And I just think when you look at their schedule, Dad, their first 6 games are crucial. All 6 of them are winnable for Maryland. How will they do in those first 6 games? The games that they should win are on the road at Wisconsin, at UCLA, at Michigan State, at Rutgers. Those are teams that they need to beat, but they're all on the road. I think that makes it hard for them, Dad. 4.5's the win total. I'm going to go under on Maryland at 4.5.
I had them at 5, so I'll go over, just over that. I think they may get to 5 wins. I think, the big games would be like Nebraska and Washington. If they can, win one of those or whatever, like you said, the games they should win are on the road. So, once they hit that stretch, we'll kind of know where they're at.
I agree. All right, Dad, that's it for our Big Ten Conference preview. If you missed any of it, make sure you go back and watch on the Belly Up Sports YouTube channel or listen on the Sports Stove Football Show podcast, available for you wherever you get your podcasts. Dad, we're up on time. I want to talk about Shamar Stewart and the Bengals at some point. We're not going to do it tonight. Maybe next week we'll touch base on that because I think it's a really intriguing story and what's going on there. Hopefully by next week we'll have a little bit more information as well. So we'll plan on talking about that next week. So make sure you come back for that one. The plan is next Thursday, me and Dad will be back here previewing the SEC. And we will see if we can get us another guest for next week. We've been so thankful to have each of these players come on each week so far in this college football conference preview. And Dane Key, shout out to you, my friend. Thank you for coming on and chatting with us tonight as well. All right, as we wrap up, make sure you go check out righteousfelon.com. Find your new favorite flavor and use the promo code STOVE15. You're going to get 15% off your purchase. Follow us online at Sports Stove on Twitter and Instagram. And if you enjoyed the program, do us a favor and share it with a friend as well. Thanks for tuning into this edition of the Sports Stove Football Show. Until next time, we'll see you around the Sports Stove.